After eating a pie, I fainted. Suddenly, I woke up bald in the hospital. When I opened my eyes, my daughter-in-law whispered, "Finally, a look that suits you." I didn't cry, but the next day, I prepared a surprise for her that made the police arrive in 3 minutes. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes wasn't the sterile smell of the hospital or the beeping machines around me. It was the cold. My scalp felt exposed, vulnerable, like I'd never felt it before in my 67 years of life. I tried to lift my hand to touch my head, but my arm felt heavy, disconnected. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed softly, casting everything in that harsh, clinical glow that makes everyone look half dead. But I wasn't dead. I was very much alive, and something was terribly wrong. "Oh, look who's finally awake." Jovi's voice cut through the fog in my brain like a blade. My daughter-in-law stood at the foot of my hospital bed, her arms crossed, wearing that perfectly pressed blue dress she always wore to church. The one that made her look like such a devoted wife and daughter-in-law to everyone who didn't really know her. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw, scratchy. Only a weak croak came out. "Don't strain yourself, Faye," she said, moving closer. Her voice carried that tone she used when other people were around. Caring, concerned, the perfect caregiver. But her eyes held something else entirely. Something cold and satisfied. "The doctors say you had quite a reaction to something you ate. Food poisoning, they think. Very severe." She paused, tilting her head like she was examining a particularly interesting specimen. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. The words hit me like a physical blow. I tried to remember what had happened before everything went black. Jovi had brought me her famous apple pie, the one everyone in the neighborhood raved about. I remembered taking that first bite, how sweet it tasted, almost too sweet. Then, nothing. My hand finally responded to my brain's commands, and I slowly, shakily, brought it up to touch my head. What I felt there made my heart stop. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. My hair was gone. All of it. My scalp was smooth, completely bald. I must have made some sound. A gasp. A whimper. Because Jovi leaned in closer. Close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. The kind that cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. "Finally," she whispered, her voice so low only I could hear it. "A look that suits you." The cruelty in those words hit me harder than the physical shock of losing my hair. This wasn't the Jovi who smiled sweetly at family dinners, who brought me soup when I was feeling under the weather, who called me Mom in front of my son David. This was someone else entirely. I wanted to cry. Every instinct told me to break down, to demand answers, to scream for David. But something deeper, some survival instinct I didn't even know I possessed, kept me quiet. Instead, I closed my eyes and let my breathing become shallow, erratic. "Nurse," Jovi called out, suddenly switching back to her concerned voice. "I think she's having trouble breathing again." A young nurse rushed in, checking my vitals, adjusting something on one of the machines. "Her heart rate is elevated," she murmured, mostly to herself. "Mrs. Henderson, can you hear me?" I kept my eyes closed, my breathing labored. Through my barely opened lids, I watched Jovi's face. She was studying me intently, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across her features. Disappointment? Impatience? "She's been in and out like this," Jovi told the nurse, her voice heavy with what sounded like genuine worry. "The poor thing. She's been getting so forgetful lately, even before this happened. Sometimes she doesn't even recognize me." That was a lie. I'd never been forgetful, never failed to recognize anyone. My mind was as sharp as it had ever been. But listening to Jovi spin this narrative, I began to understand that something much deeper was happening here. The nurse made some notes on her clipboard. "The doctor will want to run some more tests. Hair loss can be a side effect of severe poisoning, especially if there were chemicals involved. We're still waiting for some of the blood work to come back." "Of course," Jovi said. "Whatever she needs. David and I just want her to get better." After the nurse left, Jovi stayed by my bedside for another hour. She didn't say much, just sat there scrolling through her phone, occasionally sighing deeply for the benefit of any medical staff who might pass by. But I could feel her watching me, studying my breathing, my color, the monitors tracking my vital signs. When visiting hours ended, she finally stood up. "I'll be back tomorrow, Mom," she said loudly enough for the nurses to hear. Then, leaning down close to my ear, she whispered, "Sweet dreams." After she left, I lay there in the darkness, trying to piece together what had happened: the pie, my sudden illness, the hair loss, Jovi's strange behavior, the lies she'd told the nurse about my memory. A memory surfaced from about 3 months ago. I'd been feeling unusually tired, more than normal for someone my age. I'd mentioned it to David during one of our weekly phone calls, and he'd seemed genuinely concerned. "Maybe you should see a doctor, Mom," he'd said. "Jovi's been worried about you, too. She mentioned you seemed a little off last time she visited." At the time, I'd brushed it off. Jovi visited me twice a week, always bringing something: cookies, soup, fresh bread. She was such a thoughtful daughter-in-law, everyone said so. But now, lying in this hospital bed, completely bald and weak, I began to see those visits in a different light. The next morning, a different nurse came to check on me. This one was older, more experienced, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "How are you feeling today, dear?" she asked, checking my IV line. I decided to test something. "My daughter-in-law," I said, my voice still hoarse. "She said I've been forgetful. Is that true?" The nurse looked puzzled. "Forgetful? Honey, you've been perfectly lucid every time I've spoken with you. Sharp as a tack, if you ask me. Yesterday you remembered the names of all your medications, your doctor's name, even your social security number when we needed it for paperwork." My heart began to pound, so Jovi had been lying about my mental state. "But why? The hair loss," I continued carefully. "Is it permanent?" "Well, it depends on what caused the poisoning. The doctor thinks it might have been some kind of chemical reaction. Your blood showed elevated levels of several substances that shouldn't be there. The good news is, if we can figure out the source and make sure you're not exposed again, your hair should grow back within a few months." Chemical reaction. Elevated levels of substances that shouldn't be there. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. That afternoon, David finally came to visit. My son looked exhausted, worried, older than his 42 years. When he saw me, his face crumpled. "Mom, I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner. The conference in Chicago ran long, and I didn't get Jovi's message until yesterday evening." He pulled a chair close to my bed and took my hand. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," I said honestly, confused about what happened. "The doctors think it was something you ate. Food poisoning, but severe. Jovi said you'd been having some memory issues lately. Maybe you ate something that had gone bad without realizing it?" There it was again. Jovi's narrative about my failing memory. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, who I'd sacrificed so much for, and realized he believed his wife's version of events completely. "David," I said carefully, "I haven't been having memory problems. I'm as sharp as I've ever been." He squeezed my hand gently, the way you might comfort a confused elderly person. "It's okay, Mom. Sometimes these things are gradual. We don't always notice them ourselves." The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, but I barely heard it. My own son didn't believe me. He believed Jovi's lies about my mental state so completely that he dismissed my own account of my condition. After he left, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my bald head cold against the pillow. Something was very wrong, and it had been wrong for months, maybe longer. But I wasn't the confused, forgetful old woman Jovi was painting me to be. I was Faye Henderson, and I'd survived plenty in my 67 years. If someone was trying to hurt me, they'd picked the wrong target. I just needed to figure out exactly what I was up against. They released me from the hospital after 5 days, with a list of medications longer than my grocery receipts and strict instructions to take it easy. Jovi had volunteered to drive me home, of course. She was always so helpful, so caring. At least that's what everyone else saw. The ride to my house was quiet except for the soft jazz playing on her car radio. Jovi hummed along occasionally, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the steering wheel. I kept my hands folded in my lap, the hospital bracelet still cutting into my wrist, and watched the familiar neighborhoods pass by through the passenger window. "I picked up your prescriptions yesterday," she said as we turned onto my street. "All set up in your kitchen with a little schedule I made. You know how confusing all these medications can be." There it was again, the subtle implication that I couldn't handle my own affairs. I nodded but said nothing. My house looked exactly the same as when I'd left for the hospital 6 days ago, but somehow it felt different. Foreign. Like I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. Jovi helped me inside, her hand firm on my elbow, guiding me like I was an invalid. "I've been checking on things while you were away," she said, bustling around my living room, adjusting pillows that didn't need adjusting. "Watered your plants, brought in your mail, tidied up a bit." I looked around. Everything was clean, organized, but something felt off. My reading glasses weren't where I'd left them on the side table. The small notebook where I kept track of appointments and reminders was missing from its usual spot next to the phone. "Where's my notebook?" I asked. Jovi paused in her fluffing of my couch cushions. "Notebook?" "The little blue one. I keep it by the phone." "Oh, that old thing." She waved dismissively. It was full of confusing notes. Some of them didn't even make sense. I threw it away. "Don't worry. I'll help you keep track of everything you need to remember." My stomach clenched. That notebook had been my lifeline for years. Not because I was forgetful, but because I was organized. Doctor appointments, medication refills, birthdays, grocery lists. Everything important was in there. "I'd like it back," I said firmly. "Faye, honey, it's already gone. Trash pickup was yesterday." Her voice remained patient, but I caught something else underneath. Relief? "Besides, you have me to help you now. And David's been so worried. We've talked about maybe having someone check in on you more regularly." That evening, after Jovi had finally left with promises to return the next morning, I sat in my kitchen staring at the array of pill bottles she'd arranged on the counter. 7 different medications, each with its own schedule written in Jovi's neat handwriting. I picked up the first bottle, amlodipine for blood pressure. I'd been taking that for 3 years, same dosage. The second one was new, something called alprazolam. According to the label, it was for anxiety. I'd never been prescribed anxiety medication in my life. The third bottle made my blood run cold. Dunpezil. I recognized the name from commercials. It was for dementia. My hands shaking, I read the prescription label again. Prescribed by Dr. Martinez, my longtime physician, just 2 weeks ago. But I hadn't seen Dr. Martinez in over a month. I would have remembered getting a prescription for dementia medication. I would have questioned it, demanded to know why, unless I hadn't been the one to pick it up. I gathered all the pill bottles and carried them to my bedroom, where I kept a small lockbox in my closet. I was going to call Dr. Martinez's office first thing in the morning. But first, I needed to think about what had been happening over the past few months. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing. 3 months ago, that's when the unusual fatigue had started. It had been gradual at first. I'd wake up feeling groggy, like I hadn't slept well, even though I'd gone to bed at my usual time. I'd attributed it to getting older, maybe not eating as well as I should. 2 months ago, the dizziness had begun. Nothing severe, just occasional moments where I'd feel unsteady on my feet. It happened most often in the mornings, usually after I'd had my coffee and toast. Coffee that Jovi often brought me during her twice-weekly visits. 6 weeks ago, I'd started having trouble concentrating. Reading became more difficult, not because my eyes were getting worse, but because my mind seemed to wander. I'd find myself reading the same paragraph 3 times without absorbing the words and the visits. I wrote down every visit I could remember from Jovi over the past 3 months. They'd increased from once a week to twice a week, then to 3 times. Always bringing something: food, coffee, tea, little treats she'd baked. "Just thinking of you, Mom," she'd say, using that term of endearment that had once warmed my heart but now felt calculated. I thought about the meals she'd brought. Casseroles that were always too salty, making me desperately thirsty afterward. Soups that left me feeling nauseous an hour later. And always she'd insist on cleaning up, taking the dishes home to wash them herself. Don't worry about it, Faye. You just rest. Now I wondered what else she might have been washing away. The next morning, I called Dr. Martinez's office before 8 a.m. The receptionist, Linda, had known me for 15 years. "Oh, Mrs. Henderson, how are you feeling? We heard about your hospital stay." "Linda, I need to ask you about a prescription. Don Piesel. It says it was prescribed 2 weeks ago, but I don't remember seeing the doctor." There was a pause. "Let me pull up your file." I could hear typing in the background. "Yes, here it is. Your daughter-in-law came in with a note from you requesting the prescription. She said you were too embarrassed to come in yourself because of the memory issues, but that you'd discussed it with Dr. Martinez during your last visit." My mouth went dry. Did Dr. Martinez actually see me? Or just sign the prescription based on the note? Another pause, longer this time. "Mrs. Henderson, is everything all right?" "Linda, I never wrote any note. I never requested that medication. And I haven't seen Dr. Martinez since my yearly physical 6 weeks ago." The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably. Finally, Linda spoke, her voice careful. "Mrs. Henderson, I think you should come in today if possible. Dr. Martinez should see you." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the pill bottles Jovi had so carefully arranged. 7 medications. How many of them had been prescribed without my knowledge? How many contained things that shouldn't be there? I thought about the blood tests the hospital had run. Elevated levels of several substances that shouldn't be there, the nurse had said. What if those substances had come from medications I didn't even know I was taking? A memory surfaced from 2 months ago. I'd been feeling particularly foggy one morning when Jovi arrived with fresh muffins and coffee. "You look tired, Mom," she'd said with apparent concern. "Maybe you should lie down for a bit. I'll take care of cleaning up the kitchen." I'd been grateful for her thoughtfulness. I'd gone to lie down and had fallen into a deep, heavy sleep that lasted until late afternoon. When I woke up, Jovi was gone. But she'd left a note saying she'd organized my medication cabinet to make things easier for me. That was the first time I'd noticed pills that I didn't recognize mixed in with my regular medications. "To help with your energy levels," she'd explained when I asked about them later. Dr. Martinez thought they might help, but now I knew Dr. Martinez had never prescribed them. My phone rang, making me jump. Jovi's name appeared on the caller ID. "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Fine," I said carefully. "I'm just leaving the grocery store. I picked up some ingredients to make you that nice chicken soup you love, the one that always makes you feel better. I should be there in about 20 minutes. My stomach turned. The chicken soup that always made me feel drowsy afterward. The soup that left me feeling disoriented and weak. "Actually, Jovi, I'm not feeling up to visitors today." "Oh, nonsense. You need to eat, and I'm already on my way. Besides, we need to talk about getting you some additional help around the house. David and I have been discussing it." The line went dead. She'd hung up without giving me a chance to respond. 20 minutes. I looked at the pill bottles on my counter, thought about the prescription that had been filled without my knowledge, about the months of increasing fatigue and confusion that coincided perfectly with Jovi's increased attention. Something was very wrong here, and I was starting to understand that my daughter-in-law wasn't the caring woman she pretended to be. But if she was really doing what I suspected, I needed proof. Real proof. That would convince David and the authorities. I had 20 minutes to figure out how to protect myself and start gathering evidence. For the first time since waking up in that hospital bed, I felt something other than confusion and fear. I felt angry. I had exactly 18 minutes before Jovi arrived with her healing soup. 18 minutes to figure out how to protect myself and start documenting what I now believed was a deliberate campaign to poison me. Moving faster than I had in months, I gathered all the pill bottles from my counter and took them to my bedroom. I needed samples of each medication to have them tested, but I couldn't let Jovi know I suspected anything. Using a small nail file, I scraped tiny amounts of powder from several pills into separate envelopes, labeling each one carefully. Then I hid the envelopes in my jewelry box, underneath the velvet lining where my mother's engagement ring lay wrapped in tissue paper. The sound of a car door slamming told me Jovi had arrived early. I quickly put the pill bottles back exactly as she'd arranged them and hurried to the living room, trying to look weak and disoriented. "Mom, I'm here." Jovi's voice rang out as she let herself in with the spare key I'd given her months ago. A decision I was now regretting. She bustled into my kitchen carrying 2 grocery bags and wearing that bright smile that no longer fooled me. "I brought everything for the soup, plus some nice herbal tea that should help you sleep better." Sleep better? The kind of deep, heavy sleep that left me groggy and confused for hours afterward? "You really didn't need to—" I started, but she cut me off. "Of course I did. Your family, Faye. David would never forgive me if I didn't take good care of his mother." She was already unpacking ingredients, moving around my kitchen like she owned it. "Why don't you sit down and let me handle everything?" I settled into my usual chair at the kitchen table, watching her work. She hummed softly as she chopped vegetables, the picture of domestic contentment. But I was studying her now with new eyes, noting things I'd missed before. The way she positioned herself between me and whatever she was preparing, blocking my view of the pot, the small container she pulled from her purse when she thought I wasn't looking, adding just a pinch of something to the soup that definitely wasn't salt or pepper. The latex gloves she slipped on briefly before handling certain ingredients, then quickly discarded in her own grocery bag instead of my trash. "This smells wonderful," I said, keeping my voice weak and grateful. "You're such a good daughter-in-law." She glanced over at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flash across her face. Satisfaction? Pride in her deception? It was gone so quickly I might have imagined it, replaced by her usual concerned expression. "Anything for you, Mom. David's told me so much about how you sacrificed for him growing up, working 2 jobs after his father left, putting him through college. You deserve to be taken care of now." The words should have warmed my heart, but her tone was off. There was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like resentment. "He's a good son," I said carefully. "We're both lucky to have him." "Oh yes," she agreed, stirring the soup with perhaps a bit more force than necessary. "Very successful. That promotion to senior partner at the law firm came with quite a nice salary increase. And of course, there's the inheritance he'll receive someday." My blood ran cold. There it was. The first hint of what this might really be about. Inheritance? I kept my voice casual, confused. "Well, this house alone must be worth $300,000 now, with the way property values have gone up in this neighborhood. And David mentioned you have some savings, life insurance. He's your only child, so naturally." She trailed off as if realizing she'd said too much. But the damage was done. I now understood exactly what was motivating her increased attention to my health and well-being. "The soup's ready," she announced brightly. "Let me bring you a nice big bowl." I watched her ladle the soup, noting how she very deliberately chose the portion from the bottom of the pot, where anything she'd added would have settled. She set the bowl in front of me with a spoon and that same caring smile. "Eat up while it's hot. I added some special herbs that should help with your energy levels." Special herbs. I stared down at the innocent-looking chicken soup, knowing that whatever she'd added to it was designed to make me sicker, not better. But I also knew I needed to play along while I figured out my next move. "It smells delicious," I said, picking up the spoon. "But I'm not very hungry right now. Maybe I could save it for later." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, but you need to eat, Faye. You've lost weight since your hospital stay. David's worried about your nutrition." She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, clearly intending to watch me consume every drop. This was new behavior. Usually, she'd serve me something and then find busy work to do while I ate, giving whatever she'd added time to take effect before she left. I lifted a spoonful to my lips, then set it down again. My stomach still feels a bit unsettled from all those hospital medications. Maybe just the broth? "The vegetables are the most nutritious part," she insisted, "and I made sure to cook them extra soft so they'd be easy to digest." I realized she wasn't going to let me avoid eating this soup, so I did something that felt both terrifying and empowering. I picked up the bowl and pretended to take a sip, but instead of swallowing, I held the liquid in my mouth and then pretended to cough, spitting it back into the bowl. "Oh dear," I said, reaching for a napkin. "I'm sorry, this cough from the hospital just won't go away." Jovi's eyes narrowed for just a fraction of a second before her concerned expression returned. "Maybe you should try the tea instead. It might soothe your throat." She was already moving toward the stove where a small pot of tea was warming. I noticed she'd brought her own tea bags, not the regular brand I kept in my pantry. "Actually," I said, standing up slowly, "I think I need to lie down. I'm feeling quite dizzy all of a sudden." This wasn't entirely a lie. The stress of the situation was making me feel genuinely unwell, but I needed to get away from her and her poisoned offerings. "Of course," she said, but I could hear the frustration in her voice. "Let me help you to your room." "No, that's all right. I can manage." I made my way toward the hallway, moving slowly to maintain my act of frailty. "Thank you for the soup. Maybe I'll try it again later when my stomach settles." "I'll put it in the refrigerator for you," she called after me. "Make sure you have some before bedtime. It's important for your recovery." I closed my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the sounds of Jovi moving around my kitchen. I could hear her talking on her phone, her voice too low for me to make out the words, but her tone sounded urgent, almost angry. After about 20 minutes, she knocked on my door. "I'm leaving now, Mom. I put the soup in the fridge and left instructions for reheating it. Make sure you eat some later, okay? And don't forget to take your evening medications." "Thank you, dear," I called back, making my voice sound sleepy and grateful. I waited until I heard her car pull out of my driveway before getting up. Then I went straight to my kitchen and examined what she'd left behind. The soup was in a large container in my refrigerator, labeled with heating instructions in Jovi's neat handwriting. The tea bags she'd brought were nowhere to be seen. She'd taken them with her, along with the small container I'd seen her use. But she'd made one mistake. In her haste to clean up, she'd missed a small spill on my counter near the stove. A few granules of something that looked like salt, but had a slightly different texture. I carefully collected the granules with a clean spoon and put them in another envelope, which I hid with the others in my jewelry box. Then I called my doctor's office and made an appointment for the next day. Dr. Martinez needed to know about the unauthorized prescriptions, and I needed to get these samples tested. But first, I had to figure out how extensive this poisoning campaign really was. If Jovi was systematically drugging me with the goal of either killing me or having me declared incompetent, she'd need David's cooperation, or at least his ignorance. I thought about my son's reaction at the hospital, how readily he'd accepted Jovi's story about my failing memory. Had she been laying groundwork for months, telling him I was becoming confused and forgetful? Preparing him for the day when she'd suggest I needed to be in a care facility, or when she'd claim I was too mentally impaired to manage my own affairs? The phone rang, startling me out of my thoughts. David's name appeared on the caller ID. "Hi, Mom. Jovi said she stopped by today and you weren't feeling well." "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired. She's worried about you living alone. We both are. Maybe it's time to think about getting some live-in help, or looking into assisted living facilities." There it was, the next phase of their plan. "David, I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Mom, I know this is hard to hear, but Jovi's noticed some concerning changes in you over the past few months. The memory issues, the confusion, and now this hospitalization. We just want to make sure you're safe. My own son was unknowingly helping his wife poison me. The realization hit me like a physical blow." "What exactly has Jovi told you about these memory issues?" I asked carefully. "Well, she mentioned you've been repeating yourself a lot, asking the same questions multiple times, and she said you've been forgetting conversations you've had, mixing up appointments. She's been keeping track of incidents to discuss with your doctor. Keeping track of incidents, building a case against my mental competency based on complete fabrications." "David," I said slowly, "I want you to know that none of that is true. My memory is fine. I'm not confused or forgetful." There was a long pause. "Mom, people with memory problems often don't realize they have them. That's part of the condition." And there it was, the perfect trap. Anything I said to defend my mental state would be dismissed as proof that I was too impaired to recognize my own decline. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, staring at the family photos on my mantelpiece. Pictures of David as a baby, as a child, graduating from college, on his wedding day with Jovi beaming beside him. She looked so happy in that photo, so genuine. When had the woman I'd welcomed into our family become someone capable of slowly murdering me for money? But I wasn't dead yet. And despite what she might think, I wasn't the confused, helpless old woman she was portraying me to be. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. The next morning, I called a taxi to take me to Dr. Martinez's office. I couldn't risk driving myself, not when I wasn't sure what was still in my system from months of Jovi's care. I also couldn't let her know I was going anywhere. For all she knew, I was still the weak, confused woman who needed her constant supervision. Dr. Martinez had been my physician for over 15 years. He was a kind man in his early 60s, with graying hair and gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When I was called into his office, his expression was deeply concerned. "Faye, Linda told me about the prescription issue. I want you to know I never authorized any medication for memory problems. In fact, your last cognitive assessment was completely normal." I felt a rush of relief. At least someone believed me. "Doctor, I think someone has been giving me medications without my knowledge." I brought samples. I pulled out the envelopes I'd hidden in my purse. "Can you have these tested?" He examined the pill fragments I'd collected, his frown deepening. "Some of these don't look like anything I've prescribed for you. I'm going to send them to a lab immediately, and I want to run some blood tests to see what's currently in your system." While we waited for the lab technician, Dr. Wow, Martinez asked me detailed questions about my symptoms over the past few months. As I described the fatigue, dizziness, confusion, and memory issues that had been getting progressively worse, he took careful notes. "Faye, what you're describing sounds like gradual poisoning. Small amounts of certain substances over time can cause exactly these symptoms. The hair loss from your recent hospitalization suggests a more concentrated dose of something toxic. My daughter-in-law has been bringing me food and drinks regularly. She's also been managing my medications." Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment. "That's a very serious accusation, I know, but I need to understand what's been happening to me, and I need proof that will convince my son." After the blood tests were complete, Dr. Martinez walked me to the waiting area. "I should have results in 2 to 3 days. In the meantime, I want you to be very careful about what you eat and drink. Don't take any medications except the ones I'm absolutely certain you need." He handed me a small piece of paper. "This is the name of a private investigator I know. He's discreet and thorough. If someone is systematically poisoning you, you'll need evidence that will hold up legally." I called Marcus Webb, the investigator, from the taxi on my way home. His voice was gravelly but reassuring. We arranged to meet that evening at a coffee shop several miles from my neighborhood, away from any chance of running into Jovi or anyone who might report back to her. The rest of the day, I played my role perfectly. When Jovi called to check on me, I told her I'd slept most of the day and still felt weak. When she offered to bring dinner, I said I wasn't hungry, but thanked her for being so thoughtful. "Maybe tomorrow I'll feel more like eating," I said, injecting just the right amount of frailty into my voice. "Of course, Mom, you need to focus on getting your strength back. I'll bring that nice soup again tomorrow. You barely touched it yesterday." After we hung up, I realized she was going to keep pushing that soup until I consumed enough of whatever was in it to cause serious damage. I needed to move faster. That evening, Marcus Webb turned out to be a man in his 50s with observant eyes and an immediately trustworthy demeanor. Over coffee, I told him everything: the mysterious medications, the unauthorized prescriptions, the pattern of symptoms that coincided with Jovi's increased visits. "Mrs. Henderson, what you're describing could constitute attempted murder if proven, but we need solid evidence. I'm going to install some hidden cameras in your home, and I want to document everything she does during her visits." "She has a key," I told him. "She comes and goes even when I'm not expecting her." "Even better. We'll catch her in the act. He leaned forward, his expression serious. But I need to warn you, this is dangerous. If she realizes you're onto her, she might escalate her efforts. She's already escalating. The soup she brought yesterday had something in it that would have made me very sick if I'd eaten it. Marcus nodded grimly. I'll have the cameras installed tomorrow morning. Can you arrange to be out of the house for a few hours? I'll go to the library. She thinks I'm too weak to go anywhere, so she won't expect me to leave. The next morning, I called another taxi and spent 3 hours at the public library, reading newspapers and trying to look like an elderly woman passing time. When I returned home, there was no sign that anyone had been there, but Marcus had left a small note hidden under my doormat, confirming the cameras were in place. I'd barely settled back into my routine when Jovi arrived, right on schedule with her container of soup. You look a bit better today, she said, studying my face carefully. Maybe you're finally starting to recover. I do feel a little stronger, I agreed, though I'm still not very hungry. Nonsense, you need to eat. This soup has all the nutrients you need to get better. She was already heating it up, and I noticed she added that same mysterious substance from her small container when she thought I wasn't looking. This time, however, I was ready. While she was distracted with the soup, I pretended to take my morning medications, palming them instead of swallowing. When she served me the soup, I managed to eat only a few spoonfuls before claiming I felt nauseous. Maybe you should try the pills, doctor. Martinez prescribed for your stomach, she suggested, producing a bottle I'd never seen before. I picked them up for you yesterday. Another unauthorized prescription. I pretended to take 2 of the pills, but actually hid them in my pocket. Over the next 2 days, I documented everything while the hidden cameras rolled. Every meal she brought, every medication she tried to give me, every lie she told about my condition when she called David to update him on my deteriorating mental state. But it was what happened on the 3rd day that revealed the true extent of her plan. I was pretending to nap in my bedroom when I heard her let herself into my house. She wasn't supposed to visit until later that afternoon, but something had brought her here early. Through my partially open bedroom door, I could hear her moving around in my kitchen, then in my living room. After about 20 minutes, I heard her talking on her phone. No, she's still resisting the medications. She's stronger than we thought. I know, but it has to look natural. A gradual decline, not sudden. Yes, the life insurance policy is still active. $250,000 plus the house. David doesn't suspect anything. He thinks she's developing dementia. My blood turned to ice. Life insurance policy. She knew about financial details that David must have shared with her, trusting his wife completely. I'll increase the dosage in tomorrow's soup. At her age, if she has a heart attack or stroke, no one will question it. The beauty is that David will inherit everything, and I control David. She was quiet for a moment, listening to whoever was on the other end. Of course I've done this before. My mother's death was ruled natural causes. No one ever suspected the antidepressants I'd been giving her were actually, well, something much stronger mixed with her heart medication. I had to cover my mouth to keep from gasping out loud. She'd killed her own mother. This one is taking longer because she's healthier, but she won't last much longer, especially after tomorrow's meal. I've calculated the exact amount that should cause cardiac arrest in someone her age and weight. Cardiac arrest. Tomorrow's meal was meant to kill me. After she left, I immediately called Marcus Webb. We got it all on recording, he said after I told him what I'd overheard. But Mrs. Henderson, you're in immediate danger. We need to get you somewhere safe and contact the police tonight. What about David? He doesn't know what she is. We'll save him too. But first, we have to make sure you survive the next 24 hours. That evening, David called with news that made my heart sink. Mom, Jovi and I have been talking. We think it's time to look into that assisted living facility we discussed. There's a really nice place about an hour away. They have an opening next week. Next week. After tomorrow's meal that was supposed to kill me, there wouldn't be any need for an assisted living facility. David, I need to tell you something important about Jovi. Mom, please. I know you're not happy about the idea of leaving your house, but we're only thinking about your safety. He wouldn't listen. His wife had so thoroughly convinced him that I was mentally declining that he dismissed anything I said as confusion or paranoia. Just promise me you'll think about it, okay? Jovi's coming by tomorrow to cook you a nice dinner and discuss the options. A nice dinner. The final meal. After we hung up, I sat in my living room, looking at the family photos on my mantelpiece. Tomorrow, if Jovi had her way, David would be grieving his mother's sudden but natural death. He'd never know that his own wife had murdered me for money. But Marcus Webb and I had other plans. Tomorrow, when Jovi came to serve me my last meal, she was going to get a surprise that would change everything. The day that was supposed to be my last began like any other. I woke up early, made myself a simple breakfast of toast and tea, ingredients I'd bought myself and kept hidden in my bedroom, and waited for Marcus Webb's call. "Everything's in place, Mrs. Henderson." His voice was calm and reassuring through the phone. "Detective Morrison is positioned outside your house, and we have additional officers ready to move in the moment she incriminates herself. The recording equipment is running, and will capture everything she says and does. What if she doesn't confess? What if she's more careful today? Based on what we recorded 3 days ago, she believes you're helpless and has no reason to be cautious. People like her become overconfident. That's usually how they're caught." At 10:30 that morning, Jovi called to confirm our special dinner. "I'm making your favorite pot roast today, Mom," she said, her voice bright with false cheer. "With all the vegetables you love. It'll be ready around 6 o'clock. "That sounds wonderful, dear. I've been looking forward to it." "Good. And David will be joining us afterward to discuss some important decisions about your future care. We want you to be well-fed and comfortable for that conversation. Important decisions. They were planning to present me with assisted living brochures over dessert, probably after whatever she put in the pot roast had begun to take effect. In their minds, by the end of the evening, there would be no need for any care facility. The hours crawled by. I spent the day pretending to rest while actually staying alert and ready. Marcus had coached me on exactly what to do and say to get Jovi to reveal her intentions on camera. At 5:45, I heard her key in the front door. "Mom, I'm here," she called out cheerfully. "I hope you're hungry." I made my way slowly to the kitchen, playing my role of the frail, trusting victim one last time. "It smells delicious," I said, settling into my usual chair at the kitchen table. Jovi was bustling around my kitchen with the familiarity of someone who considered it her own territory. She'd brought not just the pot roast, but also fresh bread, a bottle of wine, and what looked like a homemade cake for dessert. "I wanted tonight to be special," she said, not looking at me as she arranged everything. "A celebration of all the good times we've had together." A celebration. She was celebrating my impending death. "You've been so good to me, Jovi. I don't know what I would have done without you these past few months." She glanced at me then, and I saw something flicker across her face. For just a moment, she looked almost guilty. Then the expression was gone, replaced by her usual mask of caring concern. "Your family, Faye. David and I both love you so much." As she prepared my plate, I watched her hands carefully. Just as she had with the soup, she made sure to serve me from a specific portion of the pot roast, the part where anything she'd added would be most concentrated. She also poured me a glass of wine from a bottle she'd already opened, claiming she'd had just a tiny sip to make sure it wasn't too dry for my taste. "Here we are," she said, setting the plate in front of me with a flourish. "Eat up. You need your strength for the conversation with David later." The pot roast looked perfectly normal, smelled appetizing, and in any other circumstances would have made my mouth water. But knowing what I now knew about this woman, the sight of it made my stomach turn. "It looks wonderful," I said, picking up my fork. "But, I'm feeling a bit nervous about this talk with David. Maybe you could explain what you think I should expect?" She settled into the chair across from me, her eyes fixed on my plate. "Well, we've found a lovely place called Sunset Manor. It's about an hour away, but they have excellent care and beautiful grounds. David thinks it would be perfect for someone in your condition." "My condition?" "Your memory problems, dear. The confusion that's been getting worse. David's very worried about you living alone." I took a small bite of the pot roast, but instead of swallowing, I held it in my mouth while I spoke. I don't feel confused, though. My mind seems as clear as ever. Her smile tightened slightly. That's often how it is with dementia, Mom. Patients don't realize how impaired they've become. That's why family has to make the difficult decisions. I pretended to chew and swallow, but actually spit the food into my napkin when I coughed. This is so tender. What's your secret? Oh, just lots of love and patience, and some special seasonings that help with digestion. She was watching me intently now, clearly waiting for me to consume more. You should try the wine, too. It pairs perfectly with the roast. I lifted the wine glass to my lips but didn't drink. Jovi, can I ask you something personal? Of course, Mom. Do you think David will be all right after I'm gone? I worry about leaving him alone. Something shifted in her expression. Her mask slipped just enough for me to see the calculation underneath. Oh, you're not going anywhere for a long time, she said, but her tone was off. Though when that day comes, yes, I think David will be fine. He'll have me to take care of him, and of course he'll inherit this house and your savings. That'll help him feel secure. How much do you think the house is worth now? Oh, probably around $300,000. And with your life insurance policy and savings, David will be very comfortable. She paused, then added with what she probably thought was appropriate sadness. Though of course no amount of money could replace having you here. The life insurance policy. She was talking about my death like it was an inevitable event happening in the near future. Jovi, I said carefully. Sometimes I wonder if I'm getting sicker than everyone is telling me. These past few months I've felt so much weaker, more confused. Do you think I might be dying? Her eyes lit up with something that looked disturbingly like excitement, though she tried to hide it. Oh no, Mom, don't think like that. Though, she leaned forward conspiratorially. I have noticed you've been declining faster lately. Sometimes these things progress quicker than doctors expect. How much quicker? Well, in cases like yours, sometimes patients can go from being relatively stable to having serious complications very suddenly. Heart problems, strokes. The body just can't handle the stress of the condition anymore. She was describing exactly how she planned to kill me, disguising it as medical information. Is that what happened to your mother? Jovi froze. For several seconds, she just stared at me, and I could see her mind working, trying to figure out how much I might know. My mother had been sick for a long time, she said finally, her voice more guarded now. But it was sudden at the end, wasn't it? David mentioned that she seemed to be doing well, and then she just passed away in her sleep. These things happen with elderly people, Jovi said, but there was an edge to her voice now. Sometimes it's a blessing, really. No prolonged suffering. I took another pretend bite of the pot roast, making sure she saw me chewing. I suppose you're right. Though I hope when my time comes it's peaceful. I wouldn't want to be in pain or afraid. Oh, you won't be, Jovi said, and this time she couldn't quite hide the satisfaction in her voice. I'll make sure of that. You'll make sure of that? She realized her mistake immediately. I mean, I'll make sure you have good medical care, that David and I are there for you. You won't face anything alone. But it was too late. Between her talk about my inheritance, her knowledge of my life insurance policy, and her slip about ensuring my death would be painless, she'd revealed enough of her intentions to damn herself. Jovi, I said quietly, I haven't been eating the food you've been bringing me. She blinked, confused. What do you mean? I mean, I know you've been poisoning me. I know about the unauthorized medications, the things you've been adding to my food. I know you killed your mother the same way. The color drained from her face. For a moment, she just sat there in shock. Then her expression changed completely. The mask of caring concern disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. You can't prove anything, she said, her voice completely different now. Harder. And even if you could, who would believe you? You're a confused old woman with dementia, remember? That's what everyone knows about you now. David would believe me. Jovi laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. David believes whatever I tell him to believe. Do you think he'll choose his senile mother over his loving wife? Especially when I'm the one taking such good care of his inheritance? She stood up slowly, and I saw her glance toward the kitchen knives hanging on the magnetic strip near the stove. You know, Faye, you've caused me a lot of trouble by not cooperating. The slow method was supposed to be kinder, but if you're going to be difficult, we can do this the hard way. She took a step toward the knives, but stopped when she heard a car door slam outside. That's probably David now, she said, her voice turning sweet again as she tried to return to her act. Let's not upset him with crazy accusations, shall we? But it wasn't David's voice that called out, "Police, open up!" Jovi's face went white. She spun around, looking frantically for an escape route, but Detective Morrison was already at the back door while his partner came through the front. Jovi Chapman, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, Detective Morrison announced as he entered my kitchen. This is insane, Jovi screamed, her careful composure completely shattered. She's a crazy old woman. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Ma'am, we have recordings of you discussing your plans to poison Mrs. Henderson and your confession to murdering your mother. You have the right to remain silent. As they read her rights and cuffed her, Jovi turned to me with pure hatred in her eyes. You think you've won? David will never forgive you for this. You'll die alone after all, but I wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in months, I felt completely safe. 3 hours after Jovi was arrested, David burst through my front door, his face a mixture of panic, confusion, and disbelief. I was sitting in my living room with Detective Morrison, giving my final statement about the months of systematic poisoning I'd endured. Mom, what the hell is going on? David's voice cracked as he looked around the room, taking in the detective, the evidence bags containing the poisoned food, and me, looking more alert and coherent than I had in months. Your wife has been arrested for attempting to murder your mother, Detective Morrison said gently but firmly. We have recordings of her admitting to poisoning Mrs. Henderson and confessing to killing her own mother in a similar manner. David sank into the chair across from me, his face pale. That's impossible. Jovi would never. She's been taking care of Mom. She's been worried sick about her memory problems. Son, I said quietly. I never had memory problems. Jovi made that up. She's been drugging me for months, trying to make me sick enough to die or appear mentally incompetent. But the doctors, the prescriptions, forged. She was getting medications prescribed without my knowledge, adding things to my food, slowly poisoning me. I reached over and took his hand. She was planning to kill me tonight, David. That pot roast she brought was supposed to cause a heart attack. Detective Morrison pulled out his tablet and played one of the recordings from earlier that evening. David's face crumbled as he heard his wife's voice, cold and calculating, discussing my life insurance policy and how quickly she expected me to die. She said my inheritance would make me comfortable, he whispered, his voice breaking. She talked about it like you were already dead. The $250,000 life insurance policy, I confirmed, plus this house. She knew about financial details that only you could have shared with her. David buried his face in his hands. Oh God, Mom. I told her everything. I trusted her completely. When she said you were getting confused and forgetful, I believed her. I even started looking into assisted living facilities because I thought, you thought you were protecting me. She manipulated you just like she manipulated me. How long has this been going on? Detective Morrison consulted his notes. Based on the evidence we've collected, approximately 4 months of systematic poisoning. Your wife has also confessed to killing her own mother using similar methods 2 years ago. David looked like he might be sick. Her mother died of a heart attack. She said it was sudden but peaceful. It was murder disguised as natural causes, the detective replied. We're working with authorities in Arizona to reopen that case. After Detective Morrison left, David and I sat in my kitchen in heavy silence. The pot roast that was supposed to kill me was gone, taken as evidence, but the smell of it still lingered in the air. I almost lost you, David said finally. If you hadn't figured out what she was doing. I almost didn't. She was very good at making me doubt myself. If I hadn't woken up bald in that hospital and heard her say what she said, I might never have realized what was happening. Why didn't you tell me your suspicions? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved, who had unknowingly helped his wife try to kill me. Because she'd already convinced you I was losing my mind. Anything I said would have sounded like the paranoid delusions of a woman with dementia. David was quiet for a long time, processing everything. What happens now? Now I get better. The doctor says the effects of the poisoning should fade over the next few weeks. My hair will grow back. The confusion and weakness will disappear. And Jovi? She'll face trial for attempted murder. Probably for your mother-in-law's death, too, once they investigate. David winced at the phrase, mother-in-law. I need to file for divorce immediately. Yes, you do. Over the next several weeks, my recovery was remarkable. Dr. Martinez had been right. Once the steady stream of toxins stopped, my body began healing itself. The fatigue lifted first, followed by the mental fog that had made me doubt my own perceptions. My hair started growing back in soft silver waves that I thought looked rather distinguished. David came by every few days, bringing groceries and helping with household tasks he'd never paid attention to before. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, both of us learning to trust again after Jovi's manipulation. I keep thinking about things she said, he told me one afternoon as we sat on my back porch, watching the birds at my feeder. Comments about your inheritance, jokes about how I'd be set for life someday. I thought she was just planning for our future together. I never realized she was planning for your death. She was very skilled at manipulation, David. Don't blame yourself for not seeing through it. But I should have listened to you. When you tried to tell me there was nothing wrong with your memory, I dismissed it. I chose to believe her over my own mother. She spent months laying the groundwork for that, making you believe I was declining. And she used your love for me against you, convincing you that you were protecting me. The trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, Jovi's case made headlines in our small town. Local woman charged with attempting to murder mother-in-law for inheritance. The story revealed that she'd done extensive research on untraceable poisons and had been planning my death for over a year. During the investigation, police discovered that Jovi had been stealing small amounts from my accounts for months, covering it up with fake receipts for groceries and medications I'd never received. She'd also taken out a credit card in my name and run up $8,000 in debt, planning to claim I'd done it during my mental decline. The most chilling discovery was a notebook in her possession, where she documented my daily symptoms and reactions to different substances, fine-tuning her approach like a scientist conducting an experiment. She wrote about you like you were a lab rat, Marcus Webb told me when he brought me copies of the evidence. No emotion, no remorse, just calculations about dosages and timing. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 3 months after her arrest, when I received a letter from the Arizona authorities. They were reopening the investigation into Jovi's mother's death after exhuming her body and finding the same combination of toxins in her remains. She won't be getting out of prison for a very long time, Detective Morrison assured me. Between the attempted murder charges here and the murder charges in Arizona, she's looking at life without parole. David's divorce was finalized 4 months after Jovi's arrest. He sold the house they'd shared and moved into a small apartment closer to me. He was seeing a therapist to deal with the guilt and trauma of having been married to someone who tried to kill his mother. I keep wondering how I could have been so blind, he told me during one of our weekly dinners together. She seemed so perfect, so caring. That's what made her dangerous, I replied. She was an expert at appearing to be exactly what people wanted her to be. 6 months after that terrible night when she tried to serve me my final meal, I was completely recovered. My hair had grown back thick and healthy, my energy had returned, and my mind was as sharp as ever. More importantly, my relationship with David was stronger than it had been in years. I sold Jovi's expensive jewelry that she'd left in my house during her frequent visits, using the money to take a cruise to Alaska, something I'd always wanted to do but had never felt I could afford. At 77 years old, I was finally learning to live for myself instead of just surviving. The house felt peaceful now, no longer tainted by her presence. I'd had the locks changed and installed a security system, but more than that, I'd reclaimed my space. My kitchen was mine again, my medications were my own, and every meal I prepared was safe. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about how close I'd come to dying without ever knowing I was being murdered. How Jovi would have played the grieving daughter-in-law at my funeral, comforting David in his loss while counting the insurance money she'd inherit through him. But those dark thoughts were balanced by a deep sense of satisfaction. I had outsmarted someone who thought I was just a helpless old woman. I had saved not only my own life, but also my son's future, protecting him from a woman who would have eventually turned her predatory attention to him once I was gone. The final piece of justice came a year later, when Jovi was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David and I attended the sentencing hearing, where the judge called her crimes particularly heinous acts of betrayal against the most vulnerable family members. As we left the courthouse that day, David put his arm around my shoulders. "It's really over," he said. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." I thought about that first day in the hospital, when I'd awakened bald and weak, hearing Jovi whisper that I finally looked like I suited my condition. She'd been wrong about so many things, but especially about that. I looked exactly like what I was, a survivor, and I'd never felt more beautiful in my life. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.